Don't install EV charging without a feasibility study. Welcome back to the next episode of EV Charging Minute. I'm Tony Booth, your host and the founder of Stay in Charge. We're here to share information and distribute knowledge and help people understand and answer questions about EV charging in the commercial real estate market. And today, as I've mentioned in the past, I wanted to get into this subject a little bit, and that's about feasibility studies, right? As a commercial real estate owner, manager, right, you know the value of a good feasibility study, right? Like, we don't go out and build a hotel or build an apartment complex without doing some research, without understanding the market, without knowing that there's a good chance it's going to be successful, right? Are we going to hit everyone 100%? No, we are going to have some mistakes, but we still make sure that we go out and we do that exercise. And what I want to bring up today is we want to do that with EV charging too. Even though it may seem like a small investment, it's still an investment, and we still want to make sure that, we're getting that ROI, and we want to make sure we do a little feasibility up front. So I want to take a look at that today. We're going to separate that into two parts. I want to talk about level 2 and the DC fast charging separate because they're really two different kind of animals, right? The level 2 side, as you know, that's the overnight kind of charging, the long term. Those are relatively inexpensive, and they're normally there to just be an amenity, versus a DC fast charger is way more expensive, and we really want to make that a revenue generator on its own. So I want to take them two separate ways. So jump in first with the level 2 side. Okay. As I said, that's a much simpler process when you're looking at a feasibility study here. Those are lower investment, so it's kind of a simpler process, right? What I tell everybody when we're looking at feasibility for a DC or a level 2, for a level 2 charger, what we really want to know so that we can do some financial calculations is the number of charges per month or per day. But if you're looking at it per day, you probably definitely need more than a level 2 charger, unless you're talking about an apartment complex kind of thing. There you might have 10 residents and they're going to use it, but they're not using it maybe every day. So level 2, I look more on a monthly basis because that gives us an idea how many chargers. We have to look at simultaneous kind of stuff, but you want to really know the number of charges per month. So then that way you can, make your correct financial calculations. And that's going to depend on the demand that's in your market, your customer, like your target market too, like who comes to you. Like we talked last week about the demographics and who is your avatar for your customer. So we want to know that. It depends on the EV penetration in your market. And one thing there to be careful of is penetration doesn't always tell the story, right? You could look and say, okay, well, I've got a location that has a 3% EV penetration of registered vehicles, but that doesn't necessarily transfer over to 3% of the vehicles that visit your location are EVs. So we have to make sure that penetration type, because you could also be in a scenario where you're in an area that has extremely low EV penetration, but you might have a high demand for the EV chargers. And we'll talk about that more on the DC side, but it does play into this L2 side too. When you look at maybe a hotel, we have hotels that kind of out in the middle of nowhere that put in an EV charger, and they're doing really relatively well because there's nothing around them, right? So anybody that's traveling through that area says, oh, I want to stop and spend the night, they'll stop there. So there is some benefit, to the traffic penetration, but also pay attention that it has to do with traffic going by and things like that as well. So what you really want to get to know, and what we tell everybody on a level 2 side, we want to get somewhere to the point that we are doing roughly 6 to maybe 10 charges per month. If we're getting somewhere around that, we're going to get close to paying back and getting that ROI we're looking for. So we want to look at it, understand who is going to use them when you're doing this, when you're doing the feasibility study for a level 2, make sure you really understand who's going to use them. I had an interesting conversation, 6 months ago with a group, and they were doing a whole portfolio of properties. And it was funny. They showed me this list of properties, and they said this one that they indicated as number one was going to be that was the highest demand for the property. They had a consultant come in and tell them all this stuff, and they're like, we want to start with this property here, Tony. This is the one that we've been told will have the highest demand. Well, that property, right, was a hotel property, and it was in a very urban setting. It was a decent sized property, so they had a lot of traffic coming there, and so but I looked at their whole portfolio, right, and I was like, okay, just real quick and nothing serious, but I said to him, I said, well, can I ask you a question about this particular property? It's a 150 rooms, 200 rooms, whatever. You probably run 75%, 80% occupancy, whatever. So let's say you have 120 guests there every given, 120 rooms occupied every given day. Do you know how many of them drive versus how many take a taxi or an Uber or something like that? And they said, oh, well, probably less than 20, 30%. And it's like, oh, okay. So you realize now that you're only having 30% of your cars showing up there, right? Like that's 30 cars a day. Like that's maybe not the best property, because we also looked and further down, the consultant had told them there was another property that was a destination on a coast. It was a coastal destination that was really not near any airports, right? So pretty much everybody drove in. Like they didn't have shuttles either. Like people drove into this hotel. So whether it was a rental car or people driving, they had a lot more potential for EVs at that property. And I was like, guys, I think you should start over here. No offense to what these people looked at, but we're seeing destination be a way bigger draw. So we did. They're looking at that, and that's probably where they're going to go. So make sure you're paying attention to really who's coming there and how much traffic you have. It's not as simple as just plugging some things in. So a couple shortcuts I'd like to share with people on the L2 side, right? Walk the lot any given time of the day, at night, have your night auditor or somebody, GM, somebody walk out during the day, or your maintenance guy in the morning when they get there. Just drive through the lot real quick and see how many EVs are out there. If every night you got 5-6 EVs in your parking lot, then you're probably missing out on a chance to get some incremental revenue. And you're also possibly starting to lose those people, right? Sooner or later, they'll go. Keep track of phone calls you get. Keep track of inquiries you get. You'll get people that'll call in and ask. Check other locations, right? This is one not many people think about, but go by and check the other locations near you that have chargers and see how often they're being used. And then another thing we use a lot in our studies is PlugShare and Google Maps and things like that. You can go find how many stations are around you, and don't make the mistake of, oh, there's a bunch around me, I'm not going to do it well, right? Like, because if there's a bunch around you, that means there's some demand and people could be taking your customers. So make sure you pay attention to that. But a little trick on some of those, especially PlugShare, people do check-ins. So we often look and see how many people have checked in recent months, right? So that's a good, cheap, easy way. I'll probably spend more time on the level 2 side, because that's something I think you can do a feasibility on your own. But again, we're always here to help you. So now we'll jump into the DC fast charging side. So this is a much larger investment, right? So it becomes way more complex. You're looking at doing a DC fast charging install at a location where you want to be a refueling depot. Okay, you're talking $150,000 in equipment or more, maybe, right? And now you've got to get all the power to it. So you could easily invest $500,000 into starting this venture. So we want to know, right? Like, we want to know, are we doing the right thing here? So in this instance, we really want to know, uh, we want to know charges per day. That's going to be our main thing. If we know if we can accurately predict how many charges we're going to sell a day, we have some data on average charges and things like that, and we know what rates are. We can start to really make a good business case if we know the number of charges. So just like anything else, it's going to depend on the demand. Customers that you think are going to come to this site, who they are, how much will they be there, what your local market is, okay, how much you can draw from a local market, and then what your traveling market is, because your highways have a big play in this as well. So you got to pay attention, right? There's local residences, there's highways. You really want to look at who is going to use it and how soon can you get to 6 to 8 charges per day. Obviously, you build it today, it may not be there for a few months, but we want to get there relatively quickly to that 8. I really like to see 10, but 6 and 8 is a good place to start. A couple of key things. If you've got somebody working with you doing a feasibility study and you're looking at some things, make sure you're paying attention to the occasional users versus frequent users. Okay. So if you're in an in-town setting or you have local people that are using your chargers, especially if they're coming from an apartment complex, or we have some properties that do a lot with like rideshare companies and taxi companies because they're near an airport. So those people are going to be kind of regular frequent users because they don't have another option nearby. So those are frequent users. But then you're traveling, your highway kind of user that's traveling through town, they're infrequent. Now, they may not be if you're at the right highway. Okay, don't take this the wrong way. If you're at the right highway, you're going to get a lot of what I would call infrequent users, occasional users, because it's not the same person coming back, but it is a charging session. So make sure you're paying attention to that, because that makes a difference on how you're going to structure things and what you want to be careful of. And that leads us into the type of traffic. Okay. So make sure you're paying attention to the type of traffic more so than the traffic counts, because that's the other, part I see people trip up is companies will do a feasibility study and they'll go, oh, you have, 20,000 or 30,000 vehicles drive by here every day. Guess what? There's a 5, 8, 10% penetration. So, at 10% penetration, you have 2,000 EVs driving by here every day. You're going to get X number to stop. Well, that depends on that traffic, right? If you're a convenience store out in a suburban area where 20,000 people are driving past your convenience store because they're 2 miles from home where they can pull in their garage and park, they're not stopping because most likely they're going to have a charger at home. But now if you have, 10,000 cars passing you by that are driving, that are in an urban setting, going to an apartment complex or something like that. Now, okay, now you have less EVs passing by, but you have more of them that would want to stop. Same way with a highway. When you look at highway counts, even interstates, right? You got to pay attention. If you're on an interstate, it seems like a great place, but if you're kind of like not in a space of the interstate where you have a lot of pass-through traffic, maybe those people won't stop as much. You might have to discount some of the traffic counts. And so we pay attention to that when we do them to make sure we're not, shortcutting that. And so that's really things I really wanted to point out on the DC side. Really get somebody to do one for you. We will do them. We do free assessments. We have partners we work with, so they're engineering firms and everything like that. So get your feasibility study done. Double check who does it to make sure they're not misleading you, and then do your own due diligence, because it's up to you to make a good decision. So make sure you're kind of doing the right things there. Make sure you exercise, ask questions, make sure you're paying attention to that. And the key thing again is figure out who your users are going to be, who the frequent ones are, the occasional ones, what other areas you can draw business in, and then pay attention to that type of traffic. Don't just let somebody tell you, oh, you've got 50,000 cars passing by, you're going to do great. It's not a gas station. So make sure you're doing your things right there. Again, reach out to us anytime. We will help you with a feasibility study. And yes, we do free feasibility studies. So we will do that for you. Now, that's a basic study. We also have engineering companies we work with and partners that will dig deeper, right? We can do it for you, get you started. And then once you look at that, we can dig deeper, do whatever you want, help you figure this all out. That's what we're here for at Stay in Charge. So reach out. Hope that helped you learn a little bit more about EV charging and the importance of feasibility studies. Everybody have an amazing day. Thank you, and see you on the next episode.